Hi, this is Bob Gonyea, NSSE Associate Director and Senior Research Scientist. I'm going to guide you through a tour of the NSSE institutional reports. Of course, we call it the institutional report, but there are actually as many as a dozen reports and documents within it. And it's a good idea to talk through what's in there. So I'm going to talk about how we design them, how you will find meaningful results with them, and what's available to you, and so on. But first of all, let's talk about how you would get your reports. You, of course, probably are familiar with the NSSE institution interface. And if you go to the data and reports table in there, we have the table that is listed by year. But the first thing I want you to notice is this link right here that goes to what's called Navigating Your Institutional Report. In a little bit, I'm going to be talking about that document, but I wanted to point out the link to you right away because that provides a good summary and details and context of all of the reports and resources and data that are available in this release. So jumping down into your data and reports downloads, you notice that for the year, here we're showing 2023, it's expanded. You see that there are links available called data and reports. The data is a zip download of all of the various data files that are available to you. And right off the bat, you notice that there's FSSE data in there, and that's because this particular school we call quote unquote Nesseville participated in FSSE. So if you are a FSSE school, you would also get a copy of your FSSE data. And the NSSE data is provided both in SPSS versions, which is .sav, and an Excel version. And we also provide the student comments to you in separate documents as well. Finally, there's a README document in there that provides additional context or maybe some situations that you might need to know about for that particular year. The other link is to a zip file download of your reports. Now, you'll again notice that there are three folders, one for the three projects, student engagement projects, NSSE, FSSE, and BESSE. If you participated in FSSE or BESSE, there would be information in those folders for you. But I'm going to talk about what's in the NSSE folder today. We provide the reports in two different formats. We provide them in the Excel format, and that's how they are originally designed. They're laid out in Excel, but of course Excel can be sort of glitchy, and if you share it on different computers and different print settings and so on, so things can get messed up between PCs and Macintosh and so on. So we also provide the reports in PDF versions, and those are the kind that are ready for printing and can be more easily shared, among colleagues. But you might want to use the Excel version if you wanted to, say, create additional reports or charts. You can go in there and more easily copy arrays of data or graphs, or kind of build your own different displays more easily using the Excel reports that we provided. And then we also include the overviews in the zip file. Now, in this third column, you'll see links to what we call online reports. The first two are very important. Those are your administration summary and the selected comparison groups. The administration summary just provides, your response rate information and a lot of the custom choices that you made for the administration. Like, for example, if you chose modules and things like that. So it gives a lot of contextual information like that. Your selected comparison group report includes the list of all the institutions in your various comparison groups. You could have as many as 5 comparison groups if you participated in 2 modules or a consortium and a module. So there could be as many as 5 different lists of institutions in there, and some information about how they were selected or created by default. And then I just want to point out quickly that there's a NSSE online report there, which is the link to your online institutional report that I'll be talking about a little later. Now, here's this document called the Navigating Your Institutional Report that I told you about. It's got a series of icons that give you information about what each resource provides, resource or report. Like, for example, good place to get started is where, for the overview and the snapshot. And then the institutional reports are indicated by that little graph symbol. The ones that are on the web are indicated by that other symbol. And then tools, guides, and resources, have the tool symbol and so on. So this is a good kind of handy reference to everything that's available to you through the institutional report. Now, not only is this available for download as a document that can be printed and shared and so on like that, but, we also, provide it as a complete website. So if you can actually go to the website and all this information is on that website, so you wouldn't actually have to download the document. And here is the website here. Now, what I want to do now is talk you through the different reports that we deliver. Like I said, there could be as many as a dozen of them. I'm not going to talk about them all in as much detail, but I will talk about the first several in more detail than others. Now, of course, here are the 12 reports that are kind of available to you, starting with the snapshot, engagement indicators, and so on, all the way down to the student comments. And they all have different purposes and different meanings to them, and we'll kind of share what that is. We often tell people that the best place to start is with the snapshot report. It's designed as an executive summary in 4 pages. It covers results for your engagement indicators, high impact practices, important individual questions, and also has some sort of summary of your administration in it. So it's a good handy report to get like an overall sense of your performance or your NSSE results. And it's a good place to start, if you want to then look in with more detail into some of the results inside, like into the engagement indicators. But let's kind of show what's in the snapshot report. On the first page, we show engagement indicator results, and we provide them against one of your 3 core survey comparison groups. If you didn't choose which one, we would have given you a default group for your comparison on the snapshot. The results are indicated by these up and down triangles that are red and blue. Blue triangles are pointing up, and they indicate a positive result for your institution. It's statistically significant and positive that your scores were higher than the comparison group. Red triangles are pointing down and indicate that your school was lower than the comparison group on average. If the triangles are solid, that means that the effect size was even larger. It was at least 0.3 in magnitude, which we would consider at least a medium effect size. So pay attention to the triangles. Of course, dashes mean that there was no statistical significant difference between your institution and the comparison group. On page 2, we present some what we call academic challenge questions. These are the important individual questions, and we show them graphically. For example, like how much time students spent preparing for classes. Other questions about reading and writing and how challenged they felt in their coursework. Page 3, I think, is a very interesting display on the snapshot. We identify for freshmen and seniors separately, we identify the top 5 items and the lowest 5 items relative to your comparison group and how you performed. And it's just a simple, difference between your score and their score, percentile point differences. And we graph them this way. So it lists the highest performing 5 and the lowest performing 5 separately for first year students and seniors. And then on the last page of the snapshot, we present, the students' perceived gains, and we order them from the items that they felt like they had made the most gains on while at your institution, down to the items where they felt they made the least gains on while at your institution. which is, of course, an interesting display for you. On the right side of that page, you'll see some questions about their satisfaction, whether or not they would return to your institution if they had a choice, and again, some administration details. So that is the snapshot. Now, let's say you had particular findings, concerns about one of the engagement indicators or so on. You could go straight then to the engagement indicators report and get even more detail. Now, instead of results against just one of your comparison groups, now we're going to provide results against all three of your comparison groups for the core survey. Now, there are 10 engagement indicators, and they're grouped into 4 themes. We only provide scores for the indicators themselves. We don't provide theme level scores, and that's often a confusion by our participating institutions. So there would be no quote unquote academic challenge score, but there are 4 scores within academic challenge. So again, you'll see the up and down triangles, the blue and red triangles indicating the statistical significance and the strength of the significance, which is also a very useful scan. This particular institution has some really positive results, but some that are trending down and might be worth looking at. Looking more detail about the engagement indicators, here are your actual engagement indicator scores, which are basically the average of your students' scores on those scales. And then you'll see for each of the comparison groups, the group mean, the asterisks indicating statistically significant difference, and the effect size. The effect size, by the way, here is a Cohen's d effect size. Just to give you a little bit more context, we did a study a number of years ago using the hundreds and hundreds of NSSE participating schools and all of their results. And we found that, in terms like you would call it a normative approach here, that small effects were typically those that are around 0.1. Medium effects were those that approached 0.3 or greater, and large effects were 0.5 or greater. And that was just in terms of how frequent it was to see those kinds of results among all of the institutions and all of the results that we were seeing. So with effect sizes, with engagement indicators, 0.1, 3.3, 0.5 is a very kind of general rule to go by for the magnitude of the results. And again, we shade those triangles solid if they're at least a 0.3. So that gives you a good eyeball way to see your results. We also provide box and whisker plots on the engagement indicators report, which shows the distribution of your scores. It shows you how widely distributed your students were from the lowest to the highest, or at least the 5th percentile to the 95th percentile. And then the interquartile range, which would be the 25th to the 75th, where half of your students scored. We also provide the mean and median. It's a very lot of detail that shows the distribution. And one of the interesting things you'll notice is that the variation between your students will be much greater than the difference between your school and the comparison groups. Now, on the engagement indicators report, we also provide results for the individual items within each engagement indicator. And the way that we do that is rather than representing them as means, we represent them as frequencies. So the percentage of that responded very much or quite a bit, for example, on these questions. So we sum very much and quite a bit, and we would get a percentage score of, say, 70 for question 4B or 69 for question 4C. And then on the right, rather than providing the equivalent scores for your comparison group, we provide the difference score, the percentage point difference, and we graph it. So if it's blue, that means your institution was higher than the comparison group. And so what we're highlighting here is a difference of +2, which means that the comparison group was around 67%, whereas your school was 69%. It's a very thin result. It's probably a meaningless result. It would easily be overwhelmed by sampling error and other kinds of errors, margin of error. So it wouldn't be one that I'd make a big deal out of. So you would probably look for larger blue bars or larger red bars among the individual items to kind of see which individual questions stood out for you and perhaps drove the engagement indicator result that you were seeing on the chart. So again, blue is positive for your institution. Red would be not positive for your institution. Now let's move on to the high impact practices reports. NSSE summarizes, or we ask questions about 6 high impact practices on the survey. There are, of course, more than 6 out there, but these are the 6 that NSSE has traditionally included. We're always looking to incorporate more in the future. But they include service learning, learning communities, research with faculty, internships, study abroad, and culminating senior experiences. Now, we not only provide the results for all 6 of those, we provide summaries of how many students participated in at least one high-impact practice and how many participated in 2 or more high-impact practices. And that goes to the 2007 recommendation by George Koo and others that said, we encourage first-year students to have participated in at least one, and that students should participate in another one related to their major in their junior or senior year. So we would really like to see students having at least 2 high-impact practices before they graduate. So the high impact practices report will look a little similar to the engagement indicators report. First of all, because first year students don't have the opportunity to do internships, study abroad, and capstone experiences, very, very few have those opportunities. It's just not common. We know that it's not impossible, but we only report results for the first 3, service learning, learning communities, and research with faculty. And again, what you see, you'll see all 6 for seniors. Then here are the percentages. This is the percent that participated in that activity, that said they had done it, or at least it was in progress. And again, we're showing the percentile point difference with the comparison group. Blue, again, is positive, and if it says +4, that means your institution was 4 percentage points higher than the comparison group. Here you see one negative result for service learning. It's a -6. That means that your institution was 6 points lower than the comparison group. We have statistical tests here indicated by the asterisks. Now, because these are percentages or proportions rather than means, we are doing proportion tests, and the effect size is Cohen's H instead of Cohen's D. But they're roughly similar. The only difference is that we wouldn't interpret these magnitudes as 0.3, 0.1, 0.3, 0.5. We would be more inclined to use 0.2, 0.5, 0.8 for the distribution of small, medium, and large in terms of the proportion tests or for high impact practices. And then, of course, we do the same results for all 3 of your comparison groups. So you get tons of results in these reports, very detailed statistical results. And again, we're able to do this because of the standardized way in which NSSE conducts the survey. All students are treated the same. We do full population sampling, and you know that you can trust the comparison group data. Now, we also break down the high impact practice results into the students' actual responses because it's very interesting to see, some of the results. For example, if you look down in the learning community, not only can you see the percentage that had done it, but it might be interesting to see how many still plan to do it or had not decided. Same thing with doing research. Do you have a good number of students who would like to do research and they don't seem to have the opportunities to do it, or maybe they just haven't figured out how to do it yet? So the plan to do result is often very interesting to look at for first year students. In fact, we do report those separately. We report plans to participate in a separate chart in the high impact practices report. And then finally, on the end of the high impact practices report, we break down participation into no less than 15 different social identities and experiences. For example, by major, transfer status, enrollment status, by gender identity, sexual orientation, and so on. And so that you can look at these results and say, what percentage of, say, my business students participated in service learning? And you would have that result. Again, breaking it down this much requires a lot of data or higher numbers of respondents. So if you're a small school with very low numbers of respondents overall, these charts can look rather empty. But at the same time, they can be meaningful for everybody. So I would take a look and see what you have there. And again, we do the first 3 for first year students and all 6 for seniors. We use the bar charts so that you can easily look down the columns to see which group within the category had the greatest participation. It's always good to check out the counts though, because you could be looking at very low numbers. Now I'd like to talk about the multi-year report, which is perhaps my favorite report. If you are a frequent NSSE participator, or if you at least participated at least twice since 2013, you will receive a multi-year report. We will graph all of your past NSSE results along with your current year result in this single report. And as you can see in the charts, the years are along the bottom axis. And they're graphed, and they're graphed with like, for example, they're graphed with error bars. So the error bars give you sort of like a confidence interval of, the 95% confidence interval for that year. And you can more easily look at whether or not the trends are just sort of bouncing around because of random fluctuation, or are they a true trend? For example, on the right side where from 2015 to 2016, there's a sizable jump in the participated in 2 or more HIPs. So they might have done something to encourage more high impact practice participation in 2016 that is really shows in the graph. So it's nice to see these multi-year results, and the more you participate in NSSE, we just keep adding to them. And it's with so many years now, it's getting kind of tricky to cram it all in, but it's a kind of a fun report to prepare every year. Now, I'd like to talk about the frequencies and statistical comparisons report. This is probably our most detailed report. It's 50 pages long. It covers all of the items on the survey. It gives all the frequencies of responses of all the response options, and it does means and statistical tests for every question on the survey. And this is what it looks like. And this is just 4 of the questions, but there are 100-some questions on the survey. So you can imagine why it's so large. And this is just for seniors. So this half would be the frequencies. What number and what percentage said never, sometimes, often, or very often to that question. And then not only for your institution, which is in the blue column, but also for the comparison groups. So it provides a lot of detailed information. And again, this is not the first report that I would want to look at. You want to start with a snapshot. But if you really want to get down into some of the details of how did we get this result, or what percentage of our students said they never did this? We should have a lot more students doing this at least sometimes. You can ask those kinds of questions and you can find out those kinds of results. Now, on the right side are statistical comparisons. So if you can see next to never, sometimes, often, very often, there are the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's how those responses are coded in the data. So on the right side, for that first item, there's an average of 2.9, which is slightly before an average of quote, often. You could think of it that way. So a 3 would be that you averaged often. Now, that doesn't talk about how distributed the results were from never to very often. It's just that you had an average of about often. And then, you can see how the comparison group scored. You get asterisks indicating statistical significance, and again, the effect sizes. And we use Cohen's D for the means, and we use Cohen's H for the proportion tests. The key is the same for the arrows, and again, blue is positive, and a solid blue would be that it's a magnitude of 0.3 or greater, and then the same thing for red. Okay. Now, there are several more reports. I'll go through the rest of them a little bit more quickly, but it's the same idea kind of going through here. You'll have topical module reports, respondent summary, and then I talked about online, you could get your administration summary and your comparison group lists. We have a special pocket guide report, the major report, and student comments. Let me spend a little bit of time talking about these. Now, NSSE offers up to 10 topical modules. They change a little bit every year. Every year we update some of the topical modules. We do a lot more tweaking to the topical modules than we do to the core survey. So you'll see new modules being introduced every year, and some modules being dropped because they're perhaps not quite as popular, or they're just being rotated out. Now, the module reports look a lot like the frequencies and statistical comparisons, with the response frequencies on the left and the statistical comparisons on the right. And again, we use the triangles and everything to indicate your comparison results with the comparison group. So that's what those look like. And then, if you participated in a consortium, they would look the same. Now, we have a lot of NSSE consortium that have participated over the years. If you could just look at this list, technical universities, Hispanic serving institutions, online educators, the lists go on and on. Every year we may have as many as 5 to 10 different consortium participate. We also have state systems participate as consortiums. And when you participate as a consortium, you can ask your own individual questions. And then, of course, we would produce reports for you that look like the module reports with your institution compared to the other institutions in the consortium. I wanted to give you a quick note about how we do weighting, but also mention that on the bottom of the screen here, there is a more detailed discussion on our website about weighting. But NSSE does apply weights in the reports, and we do it by sex and enrollment status and institution size. And those three tend to be the factors that have the largest impact on engagement results. So it is good to apply those weights. We can only do it, though, if you provide sex and enrollment status in your population files. And so if by chance you weren't able to give us those information in population files, then you would probably receive an unweighted report. There are other reasons why reports could be unweighted if there were faulty pop files, or there was something suspect that happened with the administration. We're still going to give you results back, but we may not trust using the weights, and so we would give you an unweighted report. Again, go to the website if you want to see detail about what weighting means and how we do that. But we weight all of our reports. We weight the engagement indicators, high impact practices. We weight the respondent summary, the frequencies, and so on. There is an exception to that, and that is this report I'm going to talk about right now. We developed the major field report several years ago. It used to be an Excel-based report, and now it's a Tableau-based tool. The major field report was designed to give institutions a way to dig into their data by discipline or by majors. Because sometimes, especially with large institutions, looking at a whole institution mean or average doesn't have as much meaning as, say, looking at the average of students who are biology majors or students who are education majors. So again, it was designed for the very large institutions, but this doesn't mean that small institutions can't benefit a lot from the major field report, and there are ways to do that. I won't go into those details because there is a really good tutorial on the NSSE website about the major field report. So if you go onto the NSSE website, I encourage you to look at that tutorial. But the major field report, it's not going to be available right away in August when your other reports come out, because it takes some time to develop the tool every year. It's really quite a complex Tableau design tool. But it provides your opportunity to customize majors, students, and institutions. You can select, for example, I want to look at my female STEM majors, and I want to compare them against other public institutions in the Great Lakes. So you can ask questions in the major field reports that specific. And it might be very interesting for you. And there might be assessment questions, or there might be questions that your faculty might have about those kinds of queries. And there, of course, you can do that an unlimited amount of times, because it's just a Tableau-based query tool. There are both within institution displays where it would display all of your major categories side by side, and you can define those majors. You can define engineering, education, biology, or you could create one category that you could call STEM. You could create one category that's like arts and humanities or something like that. So however you want to define your majors, we would provide defaults when you load the major field report, but you can adjust those any way that you want. And then it gives you results for those groupings side by side. And then again, if you can even further filter it by student types if you wanted to. If you want to look just at first generation students, or if you want to look just at students of color to see how they're performing, that's possible in the major field report. Let's see. Now, I mentioned weighting before. The major field report is an unweighted report, and the reason is because once you start filtering and drilling down into subgroups within your institutions, then the weights should no longer apply, because the weights are only valid when you're looking at whole institution averages. So we apply the weights to your reports, the other reports, because they're whole institution results. But the major field report is unweighted. Now I'm going to talk about the student comments report. Here, now we're getting into the qualitative data. This is where students are able to provide open text responses up to, I think, 5,000 characters to different prompts that we give students. There are several options, but first of all, I wanted to point out on the cover of the student comments report, we provide a simple graph that shows you whether or not a student left a comment at the end of the survey, and how they answered on that question about how they would evaluate the entire educational experience. So in other words, for those students who said excellent, their entire educational experience was excellent, were they more inclined to leave a comment or not? And here on this chart, it shows that they were slightly more inclined to leave a comment. So that might be interesting to you, to see how whether or not they left a comment related to their sort of satisfaction with your institution. But at the end of the survey, you were given the answer now is 5 options for customizable, for prompts for the end of the survey. We call it customizable. The first 4 are provided by NSSE. The 5th option, which I haven't provided here, is the one where you could provide your own or write your own end of survey prompt. And many schools are starting to do that. But if you chose one of NSSE's 4 comment prompts, these are the 4 that are available. And what we've discovered is that basically students answer the question that they're given. The first question, if you have any additional comments or feedback you'd like to share, is really kind of generic. It's not very probing. It's kind of open-ended. It's kind of passive. And what we've discovered is that the responses that people get tend not to be quite as detailed. You only get the students who really have something to say, or something's been bothering them, or burning on them. But because it's not asking for something specific, you're not getting a lot of specific results. Now, if you look at the other 3, like for example, question 2, what has been most satisfying and what has been most disappointing? You'll find that students will give you both a satisfying thing and a disappointing thing. And they follow directions and they will give you those results. And so these are the student comments that are in there. We provide the student comments both in a data file and in a report. And I'm going to show you a little bit about what the report looks like here in a second. So in the report, for every comment, we provide what their response was to that satisfaction question, how they would evaluate their entire experience. So and it's sorted by that. So these are all the students that said excellent. And then in the second column, it shows their major, which could be very important context for you. And in fact, if you have really positive comments from certain majors, then it might be something nice to share with those departments. And then you could see the comments over on the right. The comments are absolutely unedited. We've not removed profanity. We've not removed poor grammar, anything like that. So they are exactly as the students entered them. And so be careful with how you are sharing and passing those around. They could name names. They could name other students. They could say things that are concerning, or they could be things that you just don't want to share without some review. On the other hand, you might see very, very positive comments about certain faculty members, and it might be a nice thing to just kind of say, hey, look, one of the students wrote this, and I just thought you might like to read it, and it really could make their day. Now, how would you use your student comments? Now, you may be familiar that there is software available. I think there are even now AI tools that are available. But there's been for years software to conduct qualitative analysis of sort of essay text like this. There's text mining analysis that can be done, and very interesting things like that. If you or there might be somebody on your campus who has those kind of skills. You could use the comments. If you saw a particular result in your quantitative results, let's say for example, student faculty interaction was very strong at your institution, you might find comments in there that talk about positive things about faculty or positive interactions with faculty. So that if you're creating a report about the positive nature of student faculty interaction, then you could supplement it or amplify those findings with some comments that would really provide some good anecdotal evidence to support the quantitative findings. You could also use the comments to, once you find interesting things, you do some analysis, you have additional questions. So then you could build focus groups around some themes or comments that you're seeing. Like a few students said this, XYZ. What do you think that means? Where do you think they were coming from? How should we understand that? So that kind of thing might be very helpful. And then, of course, you might want to use comments in promotional materials or on websites and so on. In fact, NSSE does that all the time. We sometimes borrow student comments. Let's say we're writing about a particular high-impact practice, and a student wrote about, their experience on an internship and how positive it was. And it's a very, very good, clean, insightful comment. So it's just nice to put into, say a report or about internships or about high impact practices. There are some other additional tools that I'm not going to go deeply into right now because I think they're kind of self-explanatory. Excuse me, but there are two more online tools that will be linked on the institution interface. And I want to talk about them back to back because they often get confused. The first one is called the Online Institutional Report. Now, the Online Institutional Report is basically just a web-based version of all of the reports that I just showed you. It gives you a little bit of some graphical results. It gives you, the snapshot results. But it does it in a HTML-based type of report. It's accessible. You can share links to it with colleagues on your campus. And it also includes downloads of all of the PDFs that are in your zip file folder that you download of your report. Now, for those of you that are familiar with the binders, the NSSE binders that we used to ship out before the year 2020, we used to call this the online binder. So anyways, it's because we don't do the binders anymore. The online institutional report is sort of the web-based version of your institutional report. So it is a good thing to share with others on your campus. You can get it by just going to the link on your interface called the NSSE Online Report on that right side column. Okay? Now, I don't want you to get that confused with what I'm going to talk about next, which is the report builder. Now, the report builder is a tool that we've had for some time. It is actually more like how I talked about the major field report. The report builder loads your data and all of the comparison group data, and it allows you to query the data and provide and create simple tables of results based on the choices that you make. And we don't only load the current year of data, it's all of your past participation of data is in the report builder. So let's say that you participated 3 years in a row, and in order to do a particular analysis, you wanted to increase the number of students that are available. So you can combine all 3 years in an analysis and run a comparison against the comparison group, or create some statistics on those data. Now, the report builder is not in Tableau. It's just in an HTML based kind of format. And so it's a little bit more old school than, say, the Tableau display, but at the same time, it's really quite useful. And there's a tutorial about the report builder also on our website. So I'm not going to actually do a full demonstration of it right now, but I just want you to know that the report builder is, again, a queryable tool that you can access your current and past data to create results not only for your institution, but also with comparison group information. And you can select different types of students as well. You could reduce it to, by student majors and so on. And it's a very useful tool, so we keep maintaining it every year. And it's also accessible by link on the institution interface. In fact, you can see it there below the online report link. Okay, and then you can also see the major field report there below that one. Finally, in the zip folder that I told you about earlier, a separate zip folder, you'll get your data files. We provide the raw data in both SPSS and Excel formats. If you download the Excel, you might want to go to our website for the code books. It's all available to you. We downloaded, we provide the data in SPSS and Excel, but if you wanted it in a different format, just let us know. But for most schools that we provided in Excel, that makes it possible for them to upload it then into other formats that they're more familiar with, like SAS or Stata, or other formats. So, and just note that the student comments are in separate data files altogether, because we don't want those to be shared accidentally with other people, because they can disclose identities or other information. Well, that's about it. That was quite a long tour of the reports. I hope that you got a lot out of it. If you have any questions, please do contact us. You can write to me directly. I love getting questions from institutions. My email is rgonyea@iu.edu. And thank you very much for your time, and have a great year.